Okay, so we're going to get started. You're all very welcome. Thank you so much for joining me here today. We actually had over 200 people sign up for this webinar here today, so it's clearly a popular topic, or maybe it was just the time suited you. But either way, whatever it is, I'm very glad to have you here and to have you joining me for 3 key emotional intelligence skills for leaders in the year ahead. So we're going to be focusing obviously on emotional intelligence. What I would love to find out from you now, if you maybe just, you can see there's a Q&A box. I'm going to get you practice using that. Love a bit of interaction. So maybe pop into the Q&A. I'm going to open it up here and let me know your name and where you're joining us from today. So whether you're somewhere in Ireland or whether you're somewhere further afield, maybe just type in your name and where you're calling in from today. So love to see. Great. Dublin, lots from Dublin, Dunmanway, Clare, Athlone, Cork, Wexford. Wow, all over the place. Brilliant. Clonmel, Cork, Musgrave. Where else am I seeing here? Kinsale, Kilkenny, Tipperary. Oh, Denmark. Kristen, thank you for joining us today. Lovely to have you here with us. Great, so a great mix of people, mainly from all around Ireland, but further afield as well, as far away as Denmark. So lovely to have you with us. And I have people chatting into chat as well. Oh, Pavan is from India. Wow. Hope you can get the reception okay with us. That's brilliant. God knows what. And Malaysia. This is fantastic. So lovely. You're all so welcome. It's brilliant to have you from wherever you're calling in today. Lovely to see people from all around the world joining us. So just to introduce myself, and I can see that people are still joining us. The numbers are going up all the time. So just to confirm you're in the right place, we're here focusing on emotional intelligence for leaders for the year ahead. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me first and who am I to be telling you about this topic. My name is Niamh Hannon. For those of you from further afield, Niamh is the pronunciation of my name. It's like Eve with an N in front. The rest of you Irish are pretty familiar with it at this stage. So I'm a chartered psychologist with over 21 years experience in the field at this stage. I've worked with hundreds, I've never counted them up, but certainly hundreds, if not thousands of people, one-to-one, but also companies over the years. And today I work mainly with female leaders, really helping them to transform their lives for the better, so they can lead teams to thrive. So my expertise is largely in the area of well-being, resilience, emotional intelligence, mindfulness. I have a special interest in positive psychology. And I also train in communication and a lot of the soft skills, really, which are all make up emotional intelligence. So that's a little bit about me and my background. I've worked with a variety of companies last year since the first lockdown last March. The beauty of being online now, which was a big pivot for me, is that I can now work with companies abroad as well. So I worked with the University of Stuttgart last year. I had a lot of people, like here today, where we have people calling in from all over the world. I've certainly been speaking to people from anywhere and everywhere over the past year in different workshops that I've done for various companies and organizations. So that's a little bit about me. And I suppose what I'd like you to imagine today is that, imagine if you could rise above all the stress that everybody's going through right now between COVID and the fear around that and the scares around that, and certainly Ireland being in a really, really bad place at the moment with that. And then all your normal work stress, and then homeschooling that's going on for us here and in the UK and many countries, and everything that's stressing people out. And imagine if you could rise a level above that to a place where you feel clarity, where you feel calm, where you're happy in yourself, and you just feel at peace with everything that's going on, even when there's mayhem going on in the world around you. Well, I suppose I'd like to assure you that that is possible. So today I'm going to tell you to please put your phone away, get out your pen and paper, because you might want to take some notes as we go. turn off any distractions, close the door if you've kids running around, as I do. I've had to push them out. And, just as much as possible, try and be here for the next 45 minutes or so with me. Because the only way that you're going to get benefit from this time is if you're present with me. So to get as much as possible from it, do, turn off all the distractions, get your pen and paper out, and we're ready to go. So looking first of all, oh yes, what I must mention, just a little bit of practicality here. There's Q&A and there's chat, but I would prefer you to use the Q&A. If you can see, there should be a Q&A box. If you have questions, type them into the Q&A rather than me having to kind of pop over and back to two boxes. I'm going to keep the Q&A open, and as I go along, if questions kind of are relevant at the time, I'll answer them as I go. I'll check it every now and again, but certainly I'll make time at the end to finish up with Q&A. So if you have any questions that I haven't answered over the time, then pop them into the Q&A box and I'll get to them there. So just beginning then to explain a little bit about emotional intelligence. And so my promise here, first of all, for you today is that by the end of this session, you're going to understand more about what emotional intelligence is, and you'll understand the 3 key skills that I believe you're going to need to develop, particularly if you're a leader, to get the leading edge this year, 2021, and how to do that, okay? So that's my promise to you today, and hopefully you're going to stay with me. I can see the numbers are still jumping up here all the time, which is fantastic. So when we look at emotional intelligence, it's not just one thing, because often people think of it as a single measure, as a single thing. I'm emotionally intelligent. Actually, like, what is this? It's a whole set. It's a collection really of emotional and social skills that influence the way that we perceive ourselves, the way that we also express ourselves outwards. It influences hugely our relationships. So work relationships and social relationships, how we can meet people, how we can develop that, initially, but also maintain relationships over time. And when we look at well-being, the one common factor, when you look at well-being factors the world over, depending, regardless of what language you speak, what country you come from, what tribe you belong to, the one factor that everybody has in common is the importance of relationships to our well-being. It's the one common factor we all share, and we don't emphasize relationships enough in our lives, really. Emotional intelligence helps you with relationships, and that's going to impact on your happiness and your overall well-being, and even longevity. It also helps us to cope with challenges. Think of the year that's just passed. We've had one challenge after another continuously, and they seem to be getting bigger all the time, those challenges. And our emotional intelligence helps us to deal with that. And finally, it helps us to use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. So we're taking in emotional information from other people around us all the time. And some people are great at making sense of that, and some people really aren't. So I think what's really important here, often you'll hear about IQ, and certainly in the States, everybody gets their IQ measured. They have a measurement for it. They know by, the time they're a teenager what their IQ level is. The thing about IQ is that the most successful people are often just with an average IQ. So having an IQ does not predict success in work. It doesn't predict performance. It doesn't even predict happiness in life. So the focus, I suppose, has fallen away maybe from measuring IQ. The other thing about IQ is that it's fixed. Whatever your IQ is when you're about 19, it's peaked at that stage, and it's not going to get any better. And in fact, in your later years, it'll start to decline. So even if you study and work really hard, you're not going to build or develop your IQ. It's going to stay stable. Personality is also stable across the lifetime. If you're an introvert, you may learn more and get more confident with social skills, but you're not going to just turn into an extrovert. You may move up the scale slightly, but you're not just suddenly going to become an extrovert. You're an introvert, and that has certain traits that belong to it, and that's part of who you are. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both, for example, introversion and extroversion, part of your personality. So again, personality tends to be quite fixed across the lifespan. EQ is developmental. EQ is the part here in all of these circles that you can develop. In fact, the good news is, even if you never did any work, any personal work or anything on your emotional intelligence, it's still likely to improve over time just through life experience. So it's quite likely that your emotional intelligence is higher now than it was when you were a teenager, for example, just through, having to cope with life, meeting more people as you go along, coping with different situations, being exposed, living and experiencing. That all helps you to develop your EQ. And there is work that you can do yourself, of course, to develop it. And so that's our focus here today, and how you can develop that. But they're all part of who we are, the whole person. So I want to introduce you to the EQI 2.0 model, which is what we have in front of us here. First of all, to explain that there are many different emotional intelligence models out there. Daniel Goleman, for example, has his own model. But this one has been around for a long time. It's highly validated. It's highly scientific. There's a lot of research that has gone into it, years and years, decades of research. It's initially based on the Bar-On EQ model developed by Bar-On. You can see here below that the copyright is 1997, but in fact, Bar-On was, he was researching this kind of stuff way back, I think probably since the 70s, and it was 1995 that Daniel Goleman wrote his first book. So this is a circular model. And what that means is that there's no one part that's more important than another. And each part influences the other. So they all link in together and one plays on another. So there's 15 subscales or measurements really within this, broken into 5 composites. So I'm just going to explain that a little bit to help you to make sense of it. And even as you're looking at this, you can probably identify your strengths and also the pieces that maybe you might need to work on a little bit. So we always start with self-perception. So this is the inner self, really, what's going on inside of you. So self-perception, the 3 measurements within that are self-regard, which is how really your self-confidence, how you regard yourself, self-actualization, which is about how motivated you are to make the most of yourself, to dig into your potential, to improve yourself. So if you're here today, you probably score okay on the self-actualization score. And as I often say, anybody that comes to me, whether they join one of my programs or come to me in coaching, they're already a self-actualizer, because the people who would score low on self-actualization have no motivation to join coaching or to do this kind of work generally. And then emotional self-awareness. Now, this is key. Emotional self-awareness is possibly the most important part of all of this, in the sense that it's really like the foundation, that it's the starting point for building your emotional intelligence. You have to begin by becoming more aware of your own emotions and what's going on inside me. What am I feeling right now? Because when you're not aware of that, you can be still reacting out of that. You could be giving out to people left, right, and center, thinking that they're the problem, when actually it's something that's going on inside of you. So that's the self-perception piece, the inner piece. And then it moves to the more outer piece, how you express that outwards, the self-expression. So this is the behavior that other people see. So the 3 scores in this are emotional expression, how you express yourself emotionally. And of course, it's important to have a good balance then. So that's the other thing about this. It's not just about trying to get higher measurements on each of these. It's actually the balance that there are between them. So we need a good balance, for instance, here between emotional self-awareness and emotional expression. It wouldn't be great to be expressing yourself emotionally and be really emotionally expressive if you've got low emotional self-awareness. It means you're not taking that time to check in first about what are you trying to express. Assertiveness is another measure here in self-expression, and something that's very important to leaders, but a skill that we all need to be able to develop, and that capacity to stand up for ourselves or stand up for what we believe in and to say no. And lastly, independence. So that's, and again, if you're part of a team, you wouldn't necessarily want to have a huge high score on independence, because that might indicate that you're not as strong at collaborating. So you might still be able to, you need to be able to collaborate if you're on a team. And independence is still going to be important for leaders, because we want our leaders to be able to make a decision, to stand out there and not to have to check in with everybody about everything before they make any kind of decision. So that's the self-expression composite. Moving on now to the interpersonal realm, it moves outwards to other people. And the three measurements there are interpersonal relationships, empathy, and social responsibility. So I'm going to go into the empathy shortly. Interpersonal relationships are developing and maintaining your relationships with others. It's kind of self-explanatory. Social responsibility is really your your interest in helping others, and your interest in helping the planet, for example, and that kind of wider arena. It may be even organizational, being aware of organizational values and goals, rather than just focusing in on your team. So it's that bigger picture. Then we move on to decision making, and the three measures here are problem solving, your capacity to solve problems even in emotional situations, because remember, this is all about emotional intelligence. Reality testing is your capacity to remain objective and to look at things objectively and assess situations, particularly when you're making decisions. And finally, impulse control. Are you somebody who kind of rashly makes decisions or jumps into something, particularly if you're triggered emotionally, or can you still remain calm when you're making a decision, even when there are emotions present? And lastly, then, stress management. And this is huge. And this is, one of my key areas, certainly over the years in working with people. A lot of people come to me because they're stressed. And in the last year, stress levels have just kept going up. So stress management can be, again, broken down into three areas. I think this is really helpful. If you've been stressed, you may be good at one of these areas and need to, focus on the other two. So the first one is flexibility. And flexibility, I would say, if I was given this in 2020, flexibility would have been one of the top skills that I would have chosen. You have needed over last year, particularly for all of you leaders, you would have needed to be able to be flexible, to be able to adapt to the constant changes that are happening, to be able to adapt from working in the office to working at home, to be able to adapt to homeschooling if you're a parent, constant adapting and flexibility needed. And for those who are highly anxious, often there's a low flexibility. They like things to be predictable. They like things to kind of, to be in control, and that helps them reduce anxiety. So it's been very difficult year for anybody who suffers from anxiety. But by improving flexibility, you're going to find that constant change a little bit easier to deal with. So flexibility is definitely something to focus on. Stress tolerance then is your ability to deal with stress and tolerate stress. And let's face it, folks, we're in a new year. The vaccine, depending on what part of the world you're in, the vaccine has arrived and it has begun, and yet we've still got a long way to go, and there's a lot more stress to come. So I think stress tolerance is one of the key skills that you're going to need, particularly in the first 6 months of this year. And optimism. Optimism is really important part of managing your stress. So if you're not a born optimist, again, it's helpful to realize that you can develop optimism. It is about, I suppose, at its core, when you think of the dark tunnels that we're in with COVID, it's even when you cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel, do you believe, do you trust that there is light at the end of the tunnel? And having that belief, having that kind of faith or trust can help you through the hard times, because you have that core belief that things will get better, or that everything is going to be okay. And that helps you to get through the tough times, and that helps you to manage stress. And without that, you can struggle and really go down and go under all the stress. So that's a quick synopsis of the EQI model of emotional intelligence. So you can see that there is going to be one overall emotional intelligence score, which is kind of an average really of all of these, but you have 15 measurements there. And it's not about just getting super high scores on all of them. It's more about, you know, for you here today, because we're not doing any assessment, it's really about taking a look at the different composites, in particular the 5 different composites, and identifying where your strengths are, but also what you think you need to focus on over the year ahead. And maybe even picking out 1 or 2 to focus on, and deciding what are you going to do to help you to develop that area. So I was working with somebody yesterday, and they're saying that in their company, there had been some work done because some of the leaders had maybe constructive feedback, and that they needed to work on their empathy. So as a leadership group, they decided to work on empathy and to learn more about it, and they're really working at putting it into practice and being more empathic. And sometimes what I've seen is that if you are really good at coping, say you're really good at the stress management stuff, maybe you're really resilient and you're like the calm in the middle of the storm, maybe you can still think clearly, think rationally in the middle of chaos. But sometimes the really strong, resilient leader is can be low on empathy, that they find it so easy to cope with all that stress that they don't have an understanding maybe for those who are struggling in the same situation. I'm fine, why aren't you fine? So, you can score high in one area and still really need to work on another area. So Jill has asked, will I be sending these slides after the webinar? What I will do is, for all of you obviously here today, and for anybody who has registered for my webinar, you will get this recording sent to you so that you can look back in the slides and listen back in. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, Jill. Just going to check, are there any other questions coming in there? No, great. So today, I'm going to focus on 3 key skills, because there's no way we can focus on all of these and how you can grow them all. And the ones that I really feel are needed by leaders in the year ahead. Definitely one of the stress management ones. So I've picked stress tolerance for today, because I think flexibility is huge and optimism is still really important, but that stress tolerance is going to be really needed because we still have tough times ahead to get through. Empathy is the other one that I'm going to focus on from the interpersonal, because your workers are going through tough times. Mental health issues are more prevalent than ever before. People are struggling who have maybe never struggled before. So empathy is going to be hugely important for leaders. They need to be able to tune in with their people. And the other one that I'm focusing on, I think is going to be key over the year ahead, is problem solving. And so we're going to go into those just now. So if you do have a question, feel free to pop it into me. Hopefully everything is going okay for you. So why would you want to focus on emotional intelligence at all? What's in it for you? Well, first of all, employees or leaders with high emotional intelligence are better able to stay calm under pressure. So that comes from the stress management side. Better able to resolve conflict effectively. That's huge. I see so many people avoiding conflict and avoiding difficult conversations. And it's kind of a head in the sand approach. And you might get away with that when you're an employee, but when you're a leader, you have to be able to have those difficult conversations, and you have to be able to help resolve conflict in order to have an effective team working together. And you're able to respond to co-workers with empathy. So, the research would indicate that these skills are critical skills, really, both for leadership, for team effectiveness, for work performance. So there are lots of different stats out there. If I can think of some out off the top of my head, there's lots of research done on all of these factors. But work performance, I'm going to have a slide coming up on that even, but you'll find that, you know, though leaders, the top leaders are also the people with high EQ. Okay, so the leaders who perform the best have high emotional intelligence, and they perform significantly better than their low EQ counterparts. They also earn, this is US research, they earn an average of $29,000 more per annum. So it's money in your pocket by working on your EQ, and performance improves. So, you know, it allows you to have more influence. It's, you know, when you have emotional intelligence skills, that's critical for creating psychological safety. We know that psychological safety is so important for, you know, the well-being of a team, of employees, but also that capacity to be innovative, take risks, allow themselves to make mistakes. Is that part of the culture in your workplace, or does everybody have to get everything right all the time, in which case they're going to be stressed and keep to just what they know, and there's no innovation. And it's also crucially important for work-life balance and well-being, again, which is a really key area for all of us right now. It should always be. It should always be. I think COVID has just brought it to the forefront, and finally people are paying notice to it. So Talent Smart are some who have done some research, and they found that they tested emotional intelligence alongside many other important workplace skills, and found that, you know, EQ is the strongest predictor out of what, 33 they measured here. It's the strongest predictor of performance. So it explains a full 58% of success across the board in all kinds of jobs. So that would be higher in some jobs and lower in others, but pretty much across the board, 58% of success is predicted by EQ. So when you think of, you know, if you're a leader and you're giving feedback to one of your direct reports, very often that's focused on, the feedback is focused on, you know, direct performance, direct targets being hit, skills. And yet actually, you know, how you grow your people's potential is by supporting them to develop their emotional intelligence, because that's that's the biggest predictor of job success. So we need to be paying more attention to this overall. Yeah, so just another message coming there. If for any reason you don't get the email with the link for the recording, do contact me through LinkedIn, for example. I think probably most of you are connected with me on LinkedIn at this stage. Okay, high EQ versus low EQ leaders from Eileen. What is it that contributes to high versus low EQ in leaders? Leadership training, life experience. Yeah, it's also, so I'll tell you what, Eileen, go to hold that question till a bit closer to the end and see if it has been answered for you as we go on, okay? So just coming back to this, we're going to focus again on our stress tolerance, problem solving, and empathy. So that's what I want to go into now, and then I'm going to come back to your question, Eileen, at that stage. So, sorry, now I just need to move my boxes around on my page so I can actually see what's happening here. Okay. Okay. So when we look at stress tolerance, first of all, this is going to be relevant to all of you, whether you're a leader or not. It's important for all of your, for everybody. We all need to improve our stress tolerance. And when you're fighting with somebody at home, it's often because one or other of you have a lower stress tolerance, and you're reacting. So what is it, first of all? Well, one definition here is that it's the ability to withstand adverse events and stressful situations without developing physical or emotional symptoms. And how? By actively and positively coping with stress. So here's my number one tip to build your stress tolerance. What we know from people with high stress tolerance is that generally they have a whole variety of things that they're interested in, and hobbies, interests, outside activities. So they're not just focusing on work. They have other things going on. They have a good balance. Okay. If you look at some of our top leaders, even in Ireland, they're getting up generally quite early in the morning. They're doing their workout or going for their run. They're doing some meditation or mindfulness to begin their day. They might do a little bit of journaling, a bit of reading. Then they go into their work day. Then they'll finish, on time, and they'll spend time with their family, and they'll do something else in the evening. They're often involved in other things. They're active in societies or in charities, or they have, with their friends and so on. So it's not about, doing and being busy. It's really more about having a balance and having just more going on in your life. Now, of course, we know that this has been particularly difficult over the past year because most of our hobbies and interests have been shut down by lockdowns and by COVID. And still, it's important to have more going on in your life right now. If like me, I'm in this room, how many hours a week? And the kids come in and out, and I try and help them with their homework, still from this seat a lot of the time. So it's important to get up physically out of this seat and, go and do something else, even if it is in the house, or get outside and have a mixture. So over the last year, for instance, I've done how many jigsaws? Not something I would normally have a huge interest in, but it's something that I've been able to do in my house on a rainy evening, which means not having to switch on the TV in the evening. And it helps me to switch off. It's actually quite a mindful activity. When I'm doing a jigsaw, I'm not thinking of work. Being self-employed, I think of work a lot. So it's even just coming into little habits like that of setting things up for yourself, little interests that you can get into to help you to calm the mind down, be present, and not be just working, the rat going around in a little wheel in here all the time. So that's just an example. But that's my top tip for stress tolerance. Develop other interests, have other things going on, build up your self-care practices. I've been building them up over years, and there's lots that I do between home workouts, taking the dog for a walk, took up jogging this year, getting out to meet a friend to walk the dog when we're allowed, having an outdoor cake with a friend at a weekend, all these different things that you need to, even during lockdown, even during all those restrictions, most of those things are still allowed, and they help me to stay sane, and that helps me to manage my stress and stay calm. And that means even though I could be really busy, I'm not developing physical or emotional stress symptoms. Okay, so you're actively coping. Problem solving then is the next one, and that's the ability to find solutions to problems and situations where emotions impact decision making. So again, it's, a lot of the time you might be good at solving logical problems, but then when you're under stress or if you're feeling overwhelmed, suddenly you can't see the wood from the trees, and you can't maybe decide what you want for lunch today, never mind, this big decision you have to make in relation to your career or your work or or somebody, in the job. So this capacity is linked to a desire to do your best and confront problems rather than avoid them. So that straight away gives us a clue. Mindset is part of the solution here. So, if you're somebody who normally kind of like, avoids stress, procrastinates, push it away, don't like that, pile it under the carpet there, hide it away, then problem solving could be a little bit of an issue here. And so to improve your problem solving capacity, you would need to, develop a willingness to confront problems. And some of that is even your self-talk, telling yourself, okay, I can handle this. Okay, let's break this down. Let's break down this problem. Who could help me? So what you're seeing here is what I would call a solution focus. You want to develop a solution focus where instead of just looking at the problem, you're looking at what might the solution be? What might different options be? Who could I talk to help me to resolve this problem? Or who might know something more about it? What did I do the last time I came across something similar? So you're developing that solution focus, and that is going to help grow your problem solving potential. Okay. And then Lastly, empathy. So that's the ability to be aware of and to appreciate the feelings and thoughts of other people around you. So it's about tuning in really to what, how, and why people feel and think the way they do. And it's about being able to emotionally read other people. Some of you are complete naturals at this. I can see it in kids. You've got little empaths running around the place and they see another child crying and they're nearly ready to cry themselves. And are they okay? And they're tuning in and they can feel the other person's pain. They're sensitive. Some people just don't have that sensitivity and you have to kind of develop it. So empathy is, you don't have to be agreeing with the other person's opinion or how they feel or how they think about something. You just have to be open to trying to understand that from their point of view. Okay, so it's hugely about respect and non-judgment. So you might have a completely different way of going about things. You might have a completely different opinion or view on life or on the issue that's at hand. But empathy is about valuing, okay, your opinion and her opinion and his opinion are their feelings and what they think about it, and listening and tuning in and trying to understand it from their perspective and see things almost through their eyes. And that allows us to work collaboratively rather than competitively. Okay, so you're not then trying to bang down their opinion and shoot it down. You're understanding. And one of the key skills here is listening. Listening. We can all listen, but how often do we listen? So you can build your empathy by slowing down, being more present, tuning in and listening, and even asking useful questions. That's going to help. Okay, so they are 3 key skills that you're going to need to develop. And even if you think you're pretty good at these ones, or one of them, or 2 or the 3, the chances are, you're going to be challenged as a leader in the coming months. People are struggling, but also they're less reachable than, if you normally are empathic or sensitive to people and you're in an office situation, you have a radar that picks up what the mood is in the office that morning and who's feeling cranky or who's angry or who's out of sorts and who you might need to pay attention to. That's much more difficult through a screen with remote working. And so you do need to be checking in individually and having real authentic conversations with your people on a one-to-one, checking in. And when they're saying, you're checking in, how are you doing? And you get the fine, okay, can we get past the fine? I know you're fine, but what's really going on? How are you really? And they might say, actually, yeah, I am doing fine this week, but Jesus, if you'd asked me 2 days ago, I would have probably cried. And now you're getting to the more real conversation. Or they might say, yeah, I have said fine automatically, not fine at all, really struggling, really stressed, or whatever else. And that you're just required to listen. You're not required to fix. Okay, you don't have to fix it, but you may be able to offer support, or you may be able to, even just by listening and being present and being real with them and allowing them to be vulnerable and maybe opening up and being vulnerable yourself. Together, you may move out of kind of that empathy way of being into problem solving way of being. But you have to be careful. If you are a great problem solver, you may be rushing out of the empathy and listening and compassion and into the problem solving fix it mode. And that may be too fast for people and you can lose them. They can feel then that you're not getting them, that you haven't acknowledged the pain, first of all. So that's really important. It is, of course, important to be great at solving problems as a leader, but you can't rush into problem solving. You need to listen first and bring out your empathy first and connect and use your emotional interpersonal relationship skills to tune in and connect with the other people, first of all, who are involved. Okay, so I think the number 1 skill that contributes to emotional intelligence, growth and development is mindfulness. Think about it. If we look at, this is the definition from Jon Kabat-Zinn of mindfulness. It's one of the most popular definitions. It's about paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So you're paying attention, you have to be present, and you're bringing that attitude of non-judgmentalness, of being of positive regard, really, coming back to Carl Rogers, being present with somebody without judging them, so bringing in the empathy. So you're bringing in lots of different skills here, but the key here is that mindfulness is going to build your self-awareness, your emotional self-awareness to begin with, and that is the starting point. Mindfulness is also going to help your stress management. It's proven to help stress management. It helps us to calm. It helps us to, it's one of those ways of kind of building your stress tolerance. It's also a way of reducing anxiety. So that's going to help your flexibility. You're learning to accept the difficult stuff, so you become more okay, and you can grow your optimism more that way, even through tough times. Mindfulness helps the inner self, your self-regard. You're learning to accept self. You're becoming more comfortable with yourself. It helps then in the outer, in the interpersonal relationships realm. It's helping because you're likely to be less reactive. You're likely to be spilling out less. You're going to be more aware, and that's going to impact on your relationships, and it impacts on the people around you, and because you're feeling calmer, and that state even impacts on the people around you. So if you were to pay, I mean, I don't know, you could probably pay $250,000 to go to one of these top leadership courses in the States, for example, maybe MIT or so on. They are all going to have mindfulness and meditation as key components of that leadership training. So if you don't already have a mindfulness practice, if there was one thing that you focused on this year, I would say that this would be your key tool for building your own emotional intelligence, and then people around you will benefit too. But you're going to benefit because even if you think you're crap at meditating, the fact that you're doing it means that you're still going to get some of those benefits. The fact that you think you're crap is only a thought, and then you bring yourself back into the moment instead of focusing on the thought. So that would be my number one, giveaway, really, that mindfulness is going to grow your emotional intelligence in pretty much every realm that I can think of. So I'm just going to check in with the questions right now. I'm going into Q&A. Okay, so coming back to Eileen's question, what is it that contributes to higher versus lower EQ in leaders? Well, Eileen, I suppose, again, some of it is a self-actualization. Like, if I just even to give you myself as an example, long before I even did my master's in counseling psychology, I was interested in developing myself, and I was doing holistic courses, and so reading self-help books, things like that. And then I went on and did the master's. So I've done counseling, I've done coaching, I've done supervision up to the hilt, all that kind of self-improvement type of work. That focus is, and there are many others who don't have the same background as me at all. There are so many who have a similar focus and interest and motivation in just being the best that they can be. And that's going to be constantly developing and growing your emotional intelligence. And that means that you're more aware then and emotionally intelligent when you go into your leadership position. So yes, some people are maybe, as they grow up, just more tuned in emotionally, maybe more empathic, maybe have good people skills. And so they're going to seem more emotionally intelligent or more rounded in that way. And some people quite naturally are. But it's also something that develops. And some of that is just even having an interest in it and having a commitment to developing yourself and being at your best, being your full self, not trying to be anybody else, but just being authentically, the best part of you. And I think mindfulness really helps that, because for me, I have edges. We all do. I have reactive patterns, and mindfulness helps me to kind of smooth those out and not be as reactive and not get caught up in my patterns in the same ways I might otherwise do. So high EQ leaders have developed themselves. They have focused on this. They have realized the importance, and they place value on the emotional aspect rather than just building their skills. For example, their competency in, maths or engineering or, accounting or whatever it might be. That's important, but actually that stuff's very trainable. For the real success, the focus needs to be more on the emotional intelligence side of things, particularly for leaders. So Bernadette's saying, yeah, vulnerability can enable empathy, a willingness to share your own vulnerabilities. Absolutely. Thank you, Bernadette, for that. Yes, and I think vulnerability, although it's not counted as a skill within the emotional intelligence wheel as such, it contributes to several of those pieces, allowing ourselves. And again, somebody who's high in emotional intelligence is that because they allow themselves to be vulnerable, they recognize my strengths, my weaknesses, my vulnerabilities, and they can own them and express about that and share that and create. And that also helps the interpersonal relationships, because when I allow myself to be vulnerable, that's like implicitly giving you permission to be vulnerable too. Okay. Is there an online EI test you can do, Jill? That you'll probably find some online. So the EQI2 is set up to be online, but certainly I would never send somebody just to do an EQ test on its own and get the whole report without having a coaching session going along with that. So certainly the way I've been trained, and anybody that's been trained in that with me would give maybe a 90-minute to 2-hour coaching session as part of the package, so that you do your test online and then you get your results through your coach. The leadership report is a 27-page report. Your coach will go through that with you and help you to interpret your scores, because a lot of it, as I mentioned, it's not just about trying to get higher scores. And of course, what we do naturally is look at our lowest scores, go, oh my God, why did I don't agree with this, and I do agree with that, and oh sugar, that means I'm awful. It's more about how they interplay with each other and how they balance with each other. And you need your coach to help you to interpret the scores. So I don't necessarily recommend, I don't think you're going to get a huge value out of just seeing your results on a screen. I think you need help with that interpretation to really make use and to start looking at then your goals. And in that coaching conversation, you're going to be looking at as well, relating, well, how does this make sense to you in relation to your work? Can you think of examples where this is happening? Or and it may be that you think of examples where actually, well, maybe, this is a subjective test, so you're marking yourself on it. But there's also a 360 where you can get, you can organize to have other people in your workplace, for example, to answer it about you. So that's another possibility as well. How can you encourage vulnerability within leaders or future leaders? There has to be kind of a willingness there and an understanding of the value in it, the benefit, what's in it for me. So if you're trying to influence anybody or sell any idea, then keep that in mind, the what's in it for me thing. Okay, so if somebody can really understand the benefit of something and that what's in it for them, then they're usually more open to it. So having a little bit of research to back yourself up. Brené Brown, her TED Talks, she has books, she has courses on it, on vulnerability. That's a good place to start. If you're working with leaders, that would be maybe a good TED Talk to share, and then maybe having a discussion about vulnerability. What does it mean to people? Very often, again, we have different working styles, and if you're a real be strong working style, somebody who feels like they have to be the strong one all the time, the opposite to that in their mind is going to be weakness, and they cannot. They abhor weakness. So vulnerability is going to be a real no for that type of person until there's a bit of work done to get their mind around it. So the mindset has to change first before it's safe. And that's the other factor. It has to be safe. There's no point in being vulnerable, opening yourself up, and then, somebody going on the attack. That's like allowing yourself to be raw and then that attack happening. Dangerous. So there has to be safety. What do you do with a leader who's trained in psychology and firmly believes they are the best they can be in every situation by reading others but not listening? Tough one. That's from Anonymous. So again, you know, it may be about having a conversation, a feedback conversation where you can, you know, it's like, okay, I don't know from this question what position you're in, whether they're up here and you're reporting to them, or whether it's the other way around, or whether you're, you know, so that'll shape the conversation. But, you know, having that difficult conversation, valuing them, showing what you appreciate to them. And what one thing, if I could give you, you know, one piece of feedback, and you need to ask for permission when you're giving feedback, is that I would really find it helpful using I statements. I would really find it helpful if you could take time to listen to me first before maybe giving an opinion. And then I find that I am more likely then to listen to what you have to say. So if you would like to know how to work better with me, that's one thing that I could suggest, for example. So you're not pointing the finger, you this, you don't listen, you, that's blame, that's attacking, that's defensive. They're going to just defend themselves. Start with the I, the impact on me, the consequences that their behavior is having, but you have to get the permission to have the conversation in the first place. And if they don't like vulnerability, they're not going to allow you to have that conversation, and there's no in. So just let me get back to my slides here now, because I'm keeping an eye on the time, and we're going over. What I want to do is I want to introduce to you my program for female leaders. So guys, I'm afraid you're left out of this option. This is my 6-month program for female leaders. So if you'd like to work with me through 2021, this course starts on the 21st of January. So it's only next week. We've only a short window of time for you to get onto it. There are still some places available. It's a transformational program. You can expect change, and really the focus is on resilience, on well-being, and self-care, but we're also building emotional intelligence throughout, because as part of everything that I do, I'm building that awareness, building that self-awareness, and building on that, and building your skills in lots of different areas. So, you know, there's a tough year ahead for a lot of people. If you want to be at your best as a leader, and you want to be able to support your teams, then you need to be looking after yourself. And so that's why I developed Looking After the Leaders. So this is the 6-month program. And when I say that, the commitment is 1 full day a month. It's the 3rd Thursday of each month for 6 months. And you also get a monthly coaching call in between times as well. It's a small group of like-minded female leaders coming together to share and to allow themselves to be vulnerable. Creating that safety is of paramount importance to me within that group. And the group that are in it currently, you know, are absolutely loving that component, that they're maybe holding it together all month, helping everybody in their organization and their teams, and then they can come and be themselves and get the support, and, you know, share their wins and share their struggles. And there's huge transformation going on for them, so getting huge results. So that's what some of them are saying about the program, and we're nearly sad because we've done 4 months. We've only got 2 months left, and it's already coming to an end. But I'm starting with my 2nd cohort next week. So I don't run programs like this at the weekend. I think that's one of the questions. No, this will be on a Thursday. I will be developing a further program later in the year, which will be more less live time. So this program is live. You are with me. You are getting, I think it's something like 45 or 50 hours over the 60 months of the 6 months with me personally, live, facilitating. And so you need to commit to being present for that. And then you can ask questions and interact, and that there's so much learning that happens in that space. But it's also hugely valuable, because how often do you take a day, a month to yourself, that reflective space? That's where so much growth happens, because we're not taking time to stop and reflect and give ourselves space. And this is what this course allows you to do. But as I mentioned, I will develop another program later in the year, which will possibly be open to men as well, and which will have less of me live, but will be more flexible for you if you're just looking kind of for online to do it in your own time. But for today, we're focusing on looking after the leaders. And if you'd like to find out more about it and find out if this program is for you, I do still have some slots left for a free discovery call, a 30-minute call. That's the link there. In fact, I will copy and paste that into the chat. If I can just click on it the way I want to here. So I'm just going to put that into the chat. And you should be able to click on that link. I've got a few places gone already off that, so I've put in, I think there might be about 7 or 8 spots left if you are interested in having a call just to discover whether this is the right program for you or not, and how it might help you in the year ahead and help you to achieve your goals and create the change that you're looking for in your life over 2021. Yeah, so any other questions, pop them in. Otherwise, folks, just coming back here, let me see now. Yeah, this is if you go into my website, mindworks.ie, you'll find the leaders program. You'll find a link for that, a tab for that on the top, looking after the leaders. If you want to check it out, check out the program. I don't see any other further questions coming in. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat. Thank you all so much for your participation. Hopefully you've got everything that I've promised to do. We've covered our 3 key emotional intelligence skills. The main thing that's going to make a huge difference to all of those is going to be having a mindfulness practice, even if it's just an average of 10 minutes a day. That's going to make a big difference to you. And there are lots of places that run mindfulness courses, but do make sure that your trainer is also a practitioner, that they are walking the walk, not just talking the talk, because that's the only way that you're going to really learn. And so, you've also been given tips for each of the skills and where to start and what to focus on. So if you've identified that that's something that you need to work on, I think at this point you have more information and a good place to start. So if you haven't already connected with me on LinkedIn or on social media, that's up on screen now. You can see, you do connect to me on LinkedIn or give me a follow. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. LinkedIn is where I would be most active. And you can subscribe to my website, mindworks.ie. I will send out this video to you, the recording of it, so that you can look back in your own time. Great. So hopefully you have a better understanding of emotional intelligence and this particular model. Different models will look at things in different ways, but you've understood the key components that are there and the way that there's, a whole collection really of social and emotional competencies that make up your emotional intelligence. So we all have room to grow, folks. There's none of us that are, so highly emotional intelligent that we don't need to do anything, because that would indicate maybe a defensiveness on our own parts, which would be a contradiction in times. So thank you so much. I can see comments coming in here. If anybody's any questions, pop them into the so Louise, if you go into the chat, it's either if you open up chat rather than the Q&A, and you can see the 3 little buttons on the bottom of the chat, 3 little buttons in the box in the bottom right hand side, that'll help you to save chat, and that way you have them there. Otherwise, let me see. I've just popped it into chat box again there now. Okay, so for anybody who'd like to make an appointment with me to have a 30-minute discovery call to explore looking after the leaders, or to sign up, you can sign up directly on my website. Everything is there. All the information is on my website. Everything you should need is on the website, on the Looking After Leaders page, the Leaders Program page. So do look at that first, and that will give you all the information that you need. If you still have further questions or you're not sure, then book a call with me on my Calendly there, or just contact me. If you don't get that, just contact me by email or through LinkedIn, and I can pop it into the calendar for you instead. So looking forward to talking to some of you, and maybe even having some of you on the program with me next week, starting together to give a good start this year and make this year the end of the stress, help you to rise above the stress and the strain and all the juggling that goes on. And help you to be the best that you can be, and to be happy in your own skin, and build confidence and build your resilience. And that will have such an impact on your team, folks. Or maybe you have a leader working with you in your workplace who could benefit, who maybe you're seeing is struggling a little bit at the minute, or is stressed, or has a lot going on. And this is a support system that you actually get so much from this program. I offer coaching as well. But at the minute, what I'm saying to people is, if you're working with me coaching over 6 months, that's only going to be, maybe, I don't know, 10 hours or whatever. Whereas in this program, you're getting, 45 hours of me. So there's a huge amount more that we can do in the program. There's a lot more that you can get in terms of content learning, interaction, exercises, putting it into practice, space for reflection, so much. So somebody else is saying, I use coaching every day. However, phone calls and no face-to-face meetings is a barrier present. Any tips to help utilize my coaching? Non-verbal cues is what my skill base. Yes. So coaching, when if you like to focus on the non-verbal, then it really helps to be able to see the whole person. However, I think coaches do use, Zoom, Skype, and put it to great use, and you learn to tune in, I suppose, to the visible cues and the breaks and the pauses and the breath and so on. So there's still a lot of cues available, but I would still go for it. Don't allow screen work to be your barrier, because I've found it isn't a barrier for clients. So Kristen, thank you so much for joining me from Denmark. Lovely to have you with us. Thank you to those of you who've called in from India, from Malaysia, and from maybe, all around Ireland, all the corners and nooks and crannies of Ireland today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to finish up now, and I'll just say thank you. And if you have anything further, just check it on my website, mindworks.ie, or contact me directly by email or on LinkedIn. So thank you, folks, and wishing you all the very best of luck. Do mind yourselves, look after yourselves, and wishing you the very best of luck over the coming weeks. I hope to see some of you on my program next week, where we can get to work together. So yeah, okay, take care.